I am Terry Ferguson Simpson, and I am working on the oral history project with the William B. Harlan Memorial Library. This is our Voices of Monroe project, and we are here today talking to Bobby Ferguson. This is actually my father, Bobby Terry Ferguson, and I am named for him. I am Crystal Terry Simpson. So, why don't you tell us what your name is and where you got your name?
Well, my name is Bobby Ferguson. I have a twin brother. His name is Tommy Ferguson. My grandpa Ferguson was named Tommy, and my grandpa Hamilton was named Bob or Bobby. So I was named after Grandpa Hamilton, and Tommy was named after Grandpa Ferguson.
And where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Monroe County?
Yes, I grew up in Monroe County and about halfway between Forkton and Sulphur Lake, Kentucky, in Monroe County. Back then, it was all gravel road from Tonkinville to Sulphur Lake. From Forkton to Sulphur Lake, you didn't have the blacktop highways, it's gravel then. And we lived about halfway, was born on Grandpa's farm. We lived about halfway between Forkton and Sulphur Lake. You could go either way, about the same distance to the Forkton to Sulphur Lake.
Were those big towns back then? They had stores and schools.
Sulphur Lake, believe it or not, was really bigger than it is right now. We had an oil boom down there back in the '60s, and had quite a flurry of people coming around, big shots and everything coming into the country stores down there. It was drilling for oil, and it was a lot of excitement going on back in the '60s. But later on, as everything progressed, we got away from the country stores, and more of them closed up. But at one time in Sulphur Lake, Kentucky, I remember there was 4 stores right there in Sulphur Lake, and then off to the right, past Dudes up back in there, was a Bowman store, and these stores had about anything you wanted in them. The store that stands there right now was a Durham store, and they had a store right beside it. They had 2 stores. And after they passed on, the store was run by their daughter, Ida Murray, and her husband, Charles Lemon. They've run the store for years, but the store there now is the only one that's there. The other store would have been between where Debbie Thompson and Larry Thompson lives, sitting between their house and the store. Well, it would have been long about there.
You mentioned Dude. Who was that? Dude Russell?
Yeah, Dude Russell. One of the stores that they had was, I think the lady that had that, her name was, if I remember correct, was Gertie Hayes.
I've heard that.
And it's probably some connection to Dude's wife, I'm sure. But she had a store that was just kind of directly a little across from where Dude and Jesse lived. Also, before you get into the other 2 stores coming into Sulphur Lake there was another little store on the right. All these stores are on the left going down, but there's another store on the right there. And it was just like you see one of these mini barns right now, not too much bigger than that. There's a little store there, and I think it was run by Cecil Bowman. All the buildings are gone now, and the only one that's remaining is the main Sulphur Lake store there. It's sitting there, I guess, just like when it was ran when they closed it up. So all got the fixtures and everything like the old country stores. And I just want to throw this in there. If you'd ever lived that time, you can think about today what dollar stores are doing with their stores. They're putting them out in the country and places and everything like this. and that's a big help to people in these areas, rural areas. And this stores that they're putting in, the dollar stores, are basically what I see the new day old country stores. It gives country people a chance to go in and spend their money, and things are a lot different now than then, but the dollar stores moving to the country seems to reflect the old country stores. I know I walked a lot of times down to the Suffolk Lake store there and buy candy, and things are different back then. They didn't have they didn't have air conditioning, cooling, and all that stuff. You might go in there and buy your candy bar. They'd have a big box of them sitting there and displaying everything. You buy your candy bar, and you go outside and you open it up, and it's all melted all over the wrapper, you know. And you could buy about anything you wanted there. They had cold cuts and all that stuff. And I do remember stuff like you could buy fish if you ever had salted fish. You can buy them nowadays in stores and the freezers. They had like salted fish in barrels.
Did the salt keep them fresher? Did the salt keep them fresher where they didn't have the air conditioning?
Yeah.
Or the freezers?
It kept from spoiling. Salt is a preservative. Talking about the country stores, they have one that I'm aware of in Forkton. That's before you get into Suffolk Lake. And it was run by the Rayleigh family. And the Rayleigh family had a big farm, lots of land. They grew strawberries, corn, different tobacco, different stuff. A lot of people worked for them. And Rayleigh's had this store there. And I remember picking strawberries for Ollie Rayleigh on his farm over there. And when you got paid, we didn't make that much, very, very minimum amount we made then, but when you got paid, I remember getting paid in Rayleigh's dollars. It didn't pay you in real money, it was Rayleigh's dollars. And you could only go to his store and spend that money. So when he paid you, you go to his store and spend his money.
That was the company stores, they called
Well,
them.
it was Rayleigh's General Store, but it reminds me of, if you remember Tennessee Ernie Ford, he had a song out years ago that was called 16 Tons. I owe my soul to the company store. And that always reminded me of that experience I had in my life where I was paid in Rayleigh's dollars. It kind of reminded me of that song that Tennessee Ernie wrote, that I owe my soul to the company store, because that was the only place I could spend the money. That was an instant time in life. Like I said, it's different back then.
Have you heard of due bills? It's kind of like the Rayleigh's dollars, but they were called due bills. Have you ever heard of those?
Maybe, I don't know. I just, all people had back then, when they had stores and stuff like that, they might have used their own bills like he did instead of regular money. Money was hard to come by back then, not like it was today. If we can go on from the stores, I'm gonna just comment a little bit on who my grandparents were, parents was, and all that. If that's okay with you guys. I was born, like I said, on the farm in between Forkton and Suffolk Lake.
What did they call that area?
I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
My grandparents were Thomas and Sparrow Ferguson, and my brother Tommy was named after him. My grandmother was named Carrie Lou Hamilton Ferguson, and she was a midwife, delivered a lot of babies back then. She passed away 3 years before I was born, she passed away in 1945, and she delivered a lot of babies, but I was born after she died, so I don't know who delivered me. But I do remember my older brother Randall talking about when me and Tommy was born. And back then, they didn't know that there would be two of us, twins. And he talked about they made him get out of the house when it come time for the baby to be delivered, whoever was doing the delivering. And he crawled up under the house, and he could listen under the house of what was going on and everything. And he said, he heard him say there's one, and he said if it was a long time past, and they finally said there's another one in there.
You were born second.
I was the first one born.
Okay.
According to the birth certificate. And she delivered all these babies, and she died when she was young, back in her 60s. But I never got to meet her. But I do have at home a couple of her dresses that she wore. I have a bonnet that she had. My grandpa was a farmer, raised all kinds of crops, corn and everything. He was a musician. He played the banjo. He was a clown and performed as a clown, played the banjo, and he was a very, very great man. I never did get to know my grandma, but we raised everything we eat on the farm, and I can remember we didn't buy much from those country stores. I remember my dad going and buying a 100-pound sack of pinto beans. Everybody ate pinto beans back then, and we grew everything else on the crop, crops on the farm. We slaughtered hogs and all that for meat and everything. My grandpa and his brother William Ferguson, they kind of worked together, the neighbors next door. They had a grist mill. They made flour and meal, and we had our own flour and meal, and we made molasses on the farm. We had a molasses mill, and our farm members were making molasses. We had a big vat or pot that's probably about 10 or 12 foot long, with a crane grinding and running that juice in that metal vat, and then cooking. As it cooked, the foam would come up on the sides of that big vat, and before it got that time, us kids would always take and make us a paddle or something like you're gonna use decorate a cake, something like that. Cut it out of wood, and as that molasses cooked, it would foam up, and we would go around that side of that vat and get that foam off of that, and that was a big, what you would call a sucker today, lollipop. And but the foam was something that was skimmed off of the molasses, and they separated it. But I always liked the foam off the molasses. We come from a big family, and like I said, everything we came off the farm. Was very, very, very seldom that we ever had anything off of store shelves or anything. I remember these old country stores. They had what you call a concentrate soft drink. It come in a bottle, about the size of Coke bottles, Pepsi bottles now. And it's a concentrate, and you buy that instead of going in and buying a 8-pack of Cokes or whatever. You just buy that bottle. You take it home and you mix it with water, and you had a concentrate. It was like a Coke, orange, strawberries, like that. And that was one thing they had in the country stores you don't see nowadays. School life, as we moved along, we went to the rural country schools, and my grandpa, when he passed away, my brother, oldest brother Randall, him and his wife, they had got married, and they moved into Grandpa's. That's where we lived. After that, we moved away, and Randall continued to live there with Grandpa till he died, and then the farm was sold to the Lyons family.
That's Loretta.
No, to James Lyons' family.
Okay.
Then after that, we moved around. Kind of, Daddy just worked on the farm, sharecropping. He never had a public job other than sometimes when the pipeline would come through, he would work on the pipeline and make pretty good money then. And I remember that back years ago when I was just real small, him working on the pipeline. And I'll bring this up too. I had the opportunity later when I was about 18, 19, 20 years old to work on the pipeline myself. And I worked on the pipeline in Lafayette, Tennessee, came to back up through Gamaliel, Kentucky. I worked on the pipeline there, and the wages you got from back then was, I think the minimum wage was like $1.40 an hour. I was working on the pipeline. I was working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, and I had more money than I know what to do with because I couldn't spend it. I was working my whole life, and $1.40 an hour minimum wage. And when they wanted me to go down south with them when the pipeline was finished there, and I didn't go. One reason the wages was cheaper down that way too. I wasn't even making as much as I'm making there. And I worked farm life all my life through high school, and the most money I can remember making a day when I worked on the farm was $3 a day, and that was an 8 or 10 hour day every day, working in tobacco, hauling hay, and $3 was pretty good money back then. But as I grew up, moved away. But I'll get back to the country schools. Like I said, we moved around. My dad just worked on farms, worked for different people, I think, and I attended 6 different country schools in Monroe County. I attended the Bray School. I attended Mount Gilead School. I attended Ivy Hill School. I attended Sand Lake School. I attended White School, and I attended Thompsonville High School. I attended Cedar Hill School. I've skipped that. Then went to Tompkinsville. Now, about the time we started high school was during the segregation period, and when blacks and white were allowed to come into the same school and everything. And growing up on the farm over where we lived, we had lots of black neighbors. We had black neighbors that would come and check on us when we got sick. We had black neighbors that would come and do ironing and washing and help out and do whatever they could. And it was just like family. And we didn't even know there's such thing as desegregation back then. We were just, And Terry mentioned a while ago what they called the place. Like I said, there was 10 of us in our family, and a lot of families have a lot more children than that. Some families have 16, 17 people in their family, all not adopted or anything, all family. And so many Fergusons lived in that area at that time. The place became called Ferguson Town. They call it Ferguson Town. It's never been officially on a sign or anything. It says Ferguson Town, but everybody knew it as Ferguson Town because it was.
People still do.
And there was several black people lived around there. Tommy Moore, I remember being one. There's Walden family around there, and we all got along just fine. And when somebody was sick, they would come and set up, help out, and do everything. And it was a different time back then. And I think about times and when today everything's got some commercialized and everything. People that didn't experience what I came through today can it'd be hard for them to imagine what actually we went through growing up. Same way it would be hard for me to imagine what I went through trying to think about what the grandparents and everything ones before me went through. The hard times that I had growing up, I know my grandparents and great grandparents had a lot more hard time than that. I worked on the farm till after schooling, and then I decided I would go north to try to make more money. Went to Glasgow and unemployment office trying to get jobs at some of the local factories around here at that time. One thing that always stuck in my craw and really ticked me off about that day at that unemployment office, I had a woman that, I hate to say this, but she seemed like the unemployment office belonged to her personally, the way she treated me. And she told me, after we take all these tests and everything, she told me that I didn't have the capacity to work in a factory, that I need to go back to the farm. So it didn't sit right with me, and so I decided after school I would go to Indianapolis, and I got a job on the framing crew up there, building houses. I did that for about 12 years, and we built houses all over Indianapolis. We even built houses in Kentucky. We built houses in Tennessee. We built a house for one of the members of Bobby Goldsboro's band in Brentwood, Tennessee, on a big mountain down there, monster home. I did that for about 12 years. We didn't have no 8-hour shifts or nothing like that. We worked from daylight till dark. We worked in the cold, the rain, and the snow, and the mud. And people will not believe this, but we just framed the houses, we put them on the roof, we run the outside trim on them, and put the windows and doors in. Sometimes we would put hardwood floor down. But sometimes we would frame that house up. One day I have known us to frame 2 houses and start another one in a day with about 12 to 16, 18 people. And people will not believe that we worked that hard, but it's the honest God's truth, we did. And there's a lot of people around who can tell you the same thing that I work with, can tell you the same thing that I can tell you. Anyway, there was not a lot of benefits in that. I didn't have no insurance. All I had was just my paycheck, and that was it. So my brother had got out of the Army, Tommy, and he got a job at General Motors, and so I went and got me a job at General Motors. And when I went to work at General Motors, I was making about $2 an hour framing houses. And I went to work for General Motors. Over more than double my money. I think I made about $5 or $6 an hour when I started to work at General Motors. And I brought my paycheck, went to the bank, got my paycheck, cash, come home and laid it on the table. And I looked at Dad and I said, I'm rich. You know, I thought I was rich making $5 or $6 an hour.
What year was that? 19. What year was that?
I went to work for GM August of 1st, 1976. At that time, I'll give you a difference in what automobiles cost then and what they are today. When I went to work for GM in 1976, truck and bus in Indianapolis, you could buy a brand new Chevrolet pickup truck for $3,900. That was without the back bumper. But now you're lucky if you can buy one for $39,000. I had a good career at General Motors. I would get laid off a lot of times when it downturn in the auto industry. General Motors also had another arm of the company. It was called Detroit Diesel Allison. They made transmissions and made tank engines they made aircraft parts. They made about everything commercial. And when I would get laid off at Chevrolet, I would go to Detroit Diesel Allison to work there. And I never did quit the job that I had working at construction building houses. The whole time I was working for about a year after I went to work for GM. I was working the night shift. And how bad they needed help back then. I went in for an interview that morning, and this was on a Thursday, and they said, you come back in tonight on the night shift to work. That's how soon I went to work. But times wasn't always that great. A lot of times when things in the economy get bad or whatever, you get laid off. But I was able to work a year with GM before I got first layoff, and then a layoff hit me. And I went back to my old carpenter job, which I never quit to start with. As I said a while ago, I worked night shift at GM. I would go in on my day shift job doing carpenter work and work till about noon. I would come home and take a quick shower, get in my car and be a 15-minute drive to the GM plant, start my afternoon shift. And I did that for a solid year before I gave up the carpenter job. And in between times, I would still get laid off at GM during the course of my career. And I would always fall back on doing that carpenter work. And I was glad I had that experience to fall back on. I was able to get a retirement from GM and retire from them. I worked in GM truck and bus. I worked in Fort Wayne Assembly. I was offered jobs all across the country with GM during layoffs. The only one I took was at that time was Fort Wayne Assembly. It's a new truck plant opened up, and I went up there from a ground startup on it, and we produced the Chevrolet Silverado truck up there. I worked up there 2.5 years, and about that time, the Saturn Corporation was starting a new company, build a new car. There's kind of separated from GM, all complete different company. And always, when I moved to Fort Wayne from Indianapolis, it put me about a 7.5-hour drive from Tompkinsville. And I always wanted to get back to my ground roots, get back home. And the opportunity to go to Saturn in Spring Hill was a 3-hour drive from where I live now, so there was an opportunity for me to get back closer to home. I went to GM in 1989 and worked till 2004. Retired. Me and Tommy retired the same day down there. Had a lot of opportunities at GM, and I often think back of the woman that told me that I didn't have enough capacity to work in a factory. I worked in about 4 or 5 different General Motors plants. Did everything there is to assembling a car, stamping parts, setting dials, running equipment, heavy equipment, different stuff. And I got a lot of education. I got a high school education in Monroe County, but I got a lot of education through my life from the experiences I had from working as a carpenter. And then from my experiences working for GM, I had the opportunity to do a lot of traveling. I had the opportunity to even, as Saturn come on down there, we was kind of not considered. I was an early worker all those years with GM, but when Saturn come on, I was it was all considered. We were not considered hourly workers. We were considered salary. All of us were just like one big family, like the way they put it. And when I first went to GM, I worked in hiring down there, calling people from all over the United States to come and to be interviewed, and we would come in down there, we would interview them and make a decision on whether we wanted to hire them. And we hired about 7,500 people down there from all over the country, for all walks of life that worked for other GM plants and stuff. And had the opportunity, if you all know about the Goodyear blimp, how many people have ever ridden one that you know of? It's something that's once in a life opportunity. And like I said, I have had a lot of opportunities with GM. I'm thankful for the career I had with them. I worked in all kinds of different jobs, capacities there. And when Saturn was making a lot of cars and growing, of course they're out of business now. It's back to GM. But I had an opportunity to ride the Saturn blimp. I don't know if y'all have heard of the Saturn blimp or not, but it was just like the big Goodyear blimp. And I had the opportunity, me and my brother both did, Tommy, to ride that blimp all over the Spring Hill, Columbia, Lewisburg area for an hour's ride, getting in it on the cornfields down there on the farm, and then riding around for an hour and coming back. The most amazing experience I had in my life. And that's something a lot of people can never say they've ever done, is to ride a blimp. I'll guarantee you that. But anyway, after I had been at Saturn for 15 years and 15 days, they were getting toward the end of the year, and they were offering people retirements. I had 28 years and about 4 months time in. Normal retirement was 30 years, and they come around and wanted to know if anybody wanted to retire early. So I had about 28 years and 4 months time in, and I said, what do I sign at? Because I'm still wanting to get back to Tompkinsville. And my brother, he had about 34 years, I believe, time. He went ahead and retired too, and me and him retired the same day. He still lives in Culleoka down there. He shows them all how to hunt the dry land fish down there. You've seen them on Facebook. But I decided to move back to Tompkinsville, and I always wanted to, when I was up north, to get my family back south, back to Tompkinsville. And when my family grew up down here, my daughter Candy and Terry, we all moved back to Tompkinsville. Terry lived in Michigan for a while, but then we all moved back. And another thing, opportunity my daughter had, Candy, when I worked in Fort Wayne and Indianapolis at Fort Wayne Assembly, we building the pickup trucks. Candy was able to get a temporary job. She was still in high school, maybe a senior in high school, and she was able to get her a job at GM up there and work temporary work. So I was able to work with my daughter in that plant up there. And then when I went to Spring Hill, she was able to get on as a temporary employee down there, and I was able to work with her down there, and I enjoyed that time. And like I said, in 204, I retired, moved back here in January 13th of 205, and I've been here ever since. I've done a lot of volunteer work since my retirement. I always tried to help people when I could. Got involved with Dale Rich, Cozar Charities. Did that for several years. I work with Relay for Life. My daughter Candy and Terry and our family, we work Relay for Life. We worked anything we could do to help people in charities, benefits, anything. And last year, in 2023, we was talking, and like I said, growing up in Monroe County, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for education wise or anything like that for us, if you know where I came from. And talking with my daughter, we decided we would like to do something to help students in Monroe County. So we started to have a scholarship fund. And we call that fund Monroe Scholarship Fund for students of Monroe County. And this year, over the money we raised from donors, people that donated, people that helped out, and everything, and auction sales, we were able to make a goal, which I think Terry said was about $2,000. So I think the way she got it figured, we're going to be able to offer up 4 scholarships in May.
Yes, $400 or $500 scholarships at the graduation.
We're proud we was able to do that. And other than that, we're just hanging around, getting old, enjoying our retirement. I guess I'll close it out at that.
Okay, is there anything else you want to tell us? Do you care to name your siblings so we have, just for the record?
There was 10 of us: Randall Ferguson, Llewellyn Ferguson, Elizabeth Ferguson, Jimmy Ferguson. Then was me and Tommy Ferguson, Richard Ferguson, Sharon Ferguson Emmert, Karen Ferguson, and then Michael Ferguson. And me, Mike, Tommy, and Richard, Elizabeth, and Sharon are the only ones living. Llewellyn, Jimmy, Randall, and Karen have passed on. Families are different today, like there was back then. I'll just talk a little bit about fast food, if you would. I was probably 16, 18 years old before I ever had a McDonald's hamburger. I remember the very first time I ever went to Dovey's, got a hamburger, and this was back when I was just small. My mother, somebody took me to the dentist store next door. It was Dr. Michael's, William Carter's dentist office, Dr. Michael's daddy. He had a dentist office over at Dovey's. And I went in and got a tooth pull, and I remember coming out, and my tooth was my mouth was all numb, and they took me into Dovey's, and I got a Dovey hamburger, and I think that's probably the first Dovey hamburger I ever had.
What they cost back in?
I don't know. I didn't have money to pay for it. Somebody else paid for it. I remember when I was going to school, you could go to Dovey's and get 2 hamburgers, a Coke, and a pack of potato chips, I think for about 50, 60 cents. And which was a good deal compared to what they are today. Of course, everything is went up in prices, but they didn't have any fast food back then. The only fast food that I ever remember getting when I was growing up, and maybe when my mother had cooked a pan of biscuits and she left them sitting on the stove to cool, one of us kids would run in and grab one and take off of it. That was our fast food. So a lot of changes been brought through over the years. We had the old cell phones, not cell phones, the old phones, wall phones, like I gave you. That's antique. That you had a phone number wasn't like it was today. You had a phone number might be 75, or your phone number might be 76. That's all you dial. You didn't have a zip code like that. We lived in the country. We didn't even have the zip codes. We had what they call rural route. And where we lived, I don't remember what the route was, but your route might be like Bobby Ferguson Rural Route 5, Tompkinsville, Kentucky, or Terry Ferguson Rural Route 6, Tompkinsville, Kentucky. It just went by numbers like that. Then the zip code come along. Back then, you had the party lines on the phones. But when you had the old wooden phones that you ring, you would have so many rings, and that would be your number. You'd have a ring, maybe two shorts, and there wasn't that many phones around, so I don't know how they kept track of whose ring was ringing. But maybe if I was calling you, I might take the ringer and go around like that one time real long, or I might just go a short ring a couple of times. So that'd be you could answer the phone that way. But back then, after that, they had the party line phones. They finally got the phone numbers where you'd have you just dial 487, and then your numbers, the area code. You didn't have an area code like we got now. But they had the party line back then, and you might have 10, maybe 12, 15 people on one party line. Then they would have another party line over here, depending on the area you lived in, I guess, would be on a party line, and party line here and there, just kind of. And you pretty well knowed who was on the party line back then. It was a good thing, I guess, for a lot of people back in that day, because you remember when people used to go lean on the fence post and talk to their neighbors and gossip for maybe hours on time. They were able to do that on the telephones then. And I remember my grandma, she passed away not too long after that in Nashville, Tennessee. She was in the hospital down there. And I remember us trying to use the phone back and forth to talk to Alma and whoever was down at Nashville with my grandma to check on her and see how she was doing and everything. And one thing I remember about that party line was we would try to make a call to find out how the grandmother was doing. And it would be maybe two women on the line just talking away. And you would ask them if they could hang up so you could make a call because you had an emergency or something like that. And a lot of times they would refuse to get off the line. And even if you was telling them you had an emergency, and I didn't enjoy that type of service on the phones. People couldn't remember. People today couldn't think with the cell phones and everything we got. They couldn't realize the things was so much different back then. Technology has been good. It's helped me a long way. I never thought I'd ever be using a cell phone or a computer, but I pretty well know my way around a cell phone, pretty well know my way around a computer, and that was all brought about by my job experience at GM and everything. But people don't realize exactly, the younger generation now, what we went through growing up. And when we talk about, well, I'll bring this up, my grandpa, before we go back early, and my grandpa's farm over there, we didn't have electricity. And I remember I was about 4 or 5 years old when they come through and strung the light poles up and then strung the lines, and that was a real experience to see electricity like that. We finally got electrical power, and I remember my dad buying a TV, first TV we'd ever had, black and white, and we would all get done from work. All the neighbors from all around in the area would pile in at the house, and the living room would be full, standing room only. Everybody come to watch TV because nobody had TVs back then, and we just got electricity. And I remember before we got electricity, my grandpa had a radio, and it had a battery that was about this long and about this wide and about that thick. And he used that battery for his radio. He had a radio, phonograph, played the old records and all that stuff on it. And we would use that battery on that, hooked to the radio. We'd pick up the Grand Ole Opry and listen to the Grand Ole Opry on that. And times were different back then, and I never thought to my life, the experience I had growing up, that I would be sitting here today telling you guys what I'm telling you, because I really didn't figure I'd be alive today, but by the grace of God, I am. I've always relied on God, and I've been a Christian. Be 50 years, if I live till next February, be 50 years since I became a member of the church, and I've always tried to put God first in my life, try to serve Him. Not always as faithful as I should, which nobody has, but that's been one thing in my life that's been important to me my whole life. And I just think the opportunities I've had in this life to come from where I was raised, and as poor as we were, to be able to say I was able to get a comfortable retirement and enjoy I've been retired right now 20 years, and I've been enjoying that. Believe me, I have, and I've took opportunities to give back to the community as well, and to help people, and I just thank God for all that.
All right, I'm going to ask you about one more thing, and then we'll finish up. Something you hadn't mentioned, somebody you hadn't mentioned. Is there anybody else important in your life you might want to mention? Your wife?
Oh, my wife, Barbara Ferguson. We've been married, if we don't kill each other between now and then. We've been married for be 53 years in October, and we had two beautiful daughters. Candy, she passed away be 5 years ago, and this coming September. And our daughter Terry here, and three granddaughters: Marissa, Tristan, and Carrie Ray. She's named after my sister and my grandmother, Carrie Hamilton Ferguson. And then we now have two great grandsons that Terry and them refer to as Tater and Bean. And it's an interesting time to see them grow. And we've been married for over 50 years, me and Barbara, and we never had a male in the family till Tater was born, Raiden. And I told everybody, I said, we've been married 50 years waiting to get a boy in the family. It took 50 years before we got one.
Anything else you want to tell us before we?
No, I've made a mess of everything right now. I guess that's enough.
All right, well, we really appreciate you talking to us, and we've really enjoyed this.